Now, we need to look at step 5, training load and repetitions. The terminology used to quantify and qualify mechanical work. Let's look at that. What is work? Well, work is simply force times distance if we look at from a physics standpoint of things. Volume load is a practical measure for quantity of work performed in resistance training, which is simply the weight times the number of repetitions. Okay, so if I did 100 pounds on squat for 3 sets of 10, I would have 10 times 100 plus 10 times 100 plus 10 times 100. So then I'm looking at 3,000 as my volume load for that. Now, you can arrange repetitions and sets that affects the intensity value, which is a measure of the quality of work performed. So 10 sets of 3 versus 3 sets of 10. If I do 3 sets of 10, I am getting the same overall workload, but by changing the 3 sets of 10 to 10 sets of 3, my first 3 repetitions are going to be the most powerful and fast. I'm getting a different quality, even though my volume load is the same. 3 sets of 10 would be more hypertrophy. 10 sets of 3 would be more power. Now, if we look at the relationship between loads and repetitions, well, quite simply, the heavier you go, the fewer repetitions that you can get there. Now, load is most commonly prescribed as a percentage of 1 RM or as a repetition max. So, for instance, 85% of 1 RM is a 6 rep max. So I might be looking at either one. I might be doing sets of 6 at 85%, or I might be doing a 6 RM. You're essentially doing the same thing, you're just categorizing it a little bit differently. Now let's make sure that we're all on the same terms here, right? Same page. Load is most simplistically refers to the amount of weight assigned to an exercise. It's often characterized as the most critical aspect of a resistance training program. Without sufficient load, you're not going to elicit sufficient adaptation. A 1 RM, or 1 repetition max, is the greatest amount of weight that can be lifted with proper technique for only 1 repetition. So I can get 1 but not 2 reps with it. A repetition max is the most weight lifted for a specified number of repetitions. So if I'm saying it's a 4 RM, it's the most weight I can do for 4 but not 5 repetitions. Now here is a common relationship between percentage of 1 RM and the reps that somebody will get there. Now, outside of 100% 1 RM, there really is a lot of leeway. So if I've got somebody who can do 10 repetitions with 85%, well, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's not 85% for them. It might mean that they're just really good at doing repetitions. They might be high type 1. This is a starting point, but realize that you're going to have some leeway and individual variation there. There's no hard and fast rule for anything. But on average, your athletes will be pretty close to this. Now, if we look at the training load and repetitions, the 1 RM and testing multiple RM testing options. Well, testing the 1 RM itself is the gold standard, but it requires an adequate training status. So somebody who's intermediate or advanced, and their experience with the exercise being tested. You don't want to come in on day 1 and say, okay, everybody do a 1 RM snatch, and half of the people have never even heard of the exercise, let alone performed it. So we want to make sure that they have got a good training status with that exercise. You're typically only going to do the core exercises. You're not going to be doing bicep curl or pec fly for a 1 RM. And you're going to choose exercises that can accurately and consistently assess muscular strength and that allow the athlete to maintain correct body position throughout the testing. And if they can't do it right, you shut the test down. Now, the 1 RM and the multiple RM testing options. Well, you can estimate the 1 RM using a table or prediction equations. And there are several of each one of those. Now, there are equations available to predict 1 RM for multiple RM loads. They're the most accurate when based on low, less than or equal to 10 RM testing. I remember having somebody want to get inflated numbers, and they allowed, 20, 25, 30 reps, and in actuality, they also allowed a water break to occur during the middle of that. Well, how accurate were those numbers? Over the course of a summer, they had went from two 400-pound bench pressers on the team to 30. Did those athletes actually improve their ability to produce force? No, they just might have done like 185 pounds for 40 or 50 repetitions. I don't know how many it would be to predict that 400-pound max, but yeah, they just lowered the weight, upped the repetitions, and juiced the numbers to make themselves look better. Does that look good for on paper? Yes, but did you improve the capability of the athlete? No. And then how are you going to know what you're actually training off of? That's another flaw to this. Now, if we look at the multiple RM testing based on goal repetitions, it requires a strength conditional professional to first decide the number of repetitions, how many they're doing for the test, so then you know that you get that and not more. Now, if we talk about the training load and repetitions, so assigning the load and repetitions based off the training goal. Well, that's what it's all about right there, is knowing what the goal for that block of training is and trying to pick the appropriate load and repetitions to meet that goal. Now, once decided on, the training goal can be applied to determine specific load and repetition assignments via the RM Continuum, a percentage of 1RM, or the results of multiple RM testing. So if we look at 17.2, we'll see the testing and assigning training loads based off of repetition. So I'll let you work through here, is that you determine the 1RM, you perform the test to either get the 1RM or estimate it. Then you consider the influence of the training goal on the load and repetitions. You choose the goal repetitions to match what you're trying to do. You determine the percentage of 1RM associated with the number of goal repetitions by looking at table 17.7. Multiply the 1RM by that percentage, expressed as a decimal, and that gives you your appropriate training load. The other method that's quite a bit easier is you figure out what you're trying to train. You choose the goal repetitions to match that based off of table 17.9, and then you go about training through that. Now, looking at assigning the load and repetitions based on the training goal, use the rep max continuum, using heavy loads at the goal strength or power, moderate loads for hypertrophy, and light loads for muscular endurance. A certain RM, repetition max, emphasizes a certain outcome, but training benefits are blended at any given RM. It's not saying that if you do this type of training, you're not going to see any results in any other areas. So we're going to look at 17.3, which shows us the RM ranges associated with various training goals. So the more bold it is and the bigger it is, shows the greater impacts there. We see that strength does best from 2 to 6, 7 to 12 is a little bit less, 12 to 16 is less, 17 to 20. You are going to see a little bit of goal improvement, but that's not going to be the major outcome of that repetition range. Power. You see that power has a asterisk next to it. And this is because that power that's got to be moved fast, it's not just heavy. Okay? And we see that it does better at the smaller repetitions. Why? Well, the more that we go outside of 10 seconds, the less that we're using the high-powered metabolic efficiency, metabolic energy, so then we are going to be not as efficient. Hypertrophy, we see in that 6 to 12 repetition range, and a double asterisk. Well, that double asterisk is to represent that rest does play a role in this, and we want to accumulate as much lactic acid as possible to stimulate testosterone and growth hormone later on. Muscular endurance, we see that it does best with higher repetitions. So the higher repetitions you go for the RMs, that is going to elicit the best response for muscular endurance. Now, assigning the load and repetitions based on the training goal. Well, the relationship between the percentage of the 1RM and the estimated number of repetitions that can be performed at that load, that's what you're looking at. And the training goal is attained when the athlete lifts a load of a certain percentage of the 1RM for the goal number of repetitions. So if you're looking at building strength, you're going to be looking at 85% and above of 1RM for less than or equal to 6 repetitions. Power. Okay, a single effort event versus multiple effort event. Single effort event, it would be like shot put, discus, etc. Multiple effort event would be most other sports. So for that single effort event, you're going to be looking at 80 to 90% of 1RM for 1 to 2 repetitions. So it's heavy and it's fast. With the multiple RM, 75 to 85% for 3 to 5 repetitions. And, this is honestly based on weightlifting derivative movements. I need to point that out. Peak power actually typically occurs at 30% of 1RM on exercises like a squat. So we need to take that into account. Hypertrophy, 67 to 85% of 1RM, 6 to 12 repetitions. And muscular endurance is less than 67% and more than 12 reps.